Welcome to When It Hits the Fan, Lane County's favorite podcast for all things emergency preparedness. Whether you're just dipping your toes into the world of emergency preparedness, or you've been building bunkers since Y2K, we've got something for you. Hosted by Lane County Emergency Management, this podcast is all about equipping you with the knowledge and resources to be prepared and stay safe, no matter what hits the fan.
Hi, Tiffany.
Hey, Devon. How's it going?
It's going well. You have been busy over the last couple of months. What's happening over there in emergency management?
It is busy. It's a busy job. Well, I just presented this morning to the board, and it's worth repeating: out with wildfire and in with winter weather. So we're closing down the wildfire season and getting ready to meet the cold weather. We're going to be in a La Nina state this year, which possibly means wetter weather, but not necessarily colder.
Well, I think our conversation today is especially timely. We're lucky to have Kevin Woodworth with us, and specifically to talk about the work that he and others have done in the Mohawk Valley around community preparedness.
Thanks so much. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
I'm really excited to hear about the work that you did in Mohawk Valley. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what the catalyst was for getting started and what your role was in the beginning?
So for me, I'm retired from the sheriff's office here in Lane County and started in 1985. And through the course of my career at the sheriff's office, got exposed to a number of, natural disasters and floods and fires, setting up command posts for wildfires, and of course the 96 flood. I was a poor day shift patrol officer working the Mohawk Valley that day, as a matter of fact. And after I retired, I live out in the Mohawk Valley, and I was, after I retired, was asked if I would be interested in getting on the fire board for Mohawk, and I did, and I got elected to the position, and I'm currently the president of the board for Mohawk. And so what we've tried to do is we realize this important topic of emergency preparedness. We've dealt with snowstorms, floods. We were evacuated during the holiday farm fire. So there's been a number of incidents. This ice storm last year was huge. And so what we decided to do was we just needed to get the folks in that valley better prepared to deal with these types of emergencies.
That's great.
I would be curious to know how you first got that community group up and running. The Mohawk Valley has got quite a range. And so people aren't necessarily cheek to jowl in most areas. And as you said, people are so busy now. So what did it look like to initially get that group formed and get buy-in from people in your community?
I think it was probably after the big snowstorm that we had that really caught people off guard. And so what we did was we created this Facebook page because social media is huge these days. And so we created our Facebook page and then just started sharing information there. And the more information we shared, the more people we had come on board. And so it's like after every major event we have, like after the ice storm, I bet we had 50 new people come on board onto the Facebook page. And so once you get this community group going, and there's probably 30 to 40 people that are pretty diehard planners, it's quick to get that word out. They talk to their neighbors and their family and their friends. We have people on our Facebook page who have elderly adult family that live out in the valley or have family in general, and they've come on board to see, to kind of keep tabs on them when things are going down. And then as part of that, we started our general mobile radio plan out there. And so that's really brought a big group together. The whole radio thing where they can get on the radios during an emergency and talk to their neighbors, talk to the fire department is pretty comforting. So
one of the things that I first learned about this group is about the radio project. And I was so struck by how unusual it is, at least in our area, to have a community that's planning actively around power outages and loss of other communications tools. We've seen it time and time again, whether it's ice or snow or even heavy smoke from a wildfire. Our phones often are the first thing to become essentially unusable. And so, talk to us more about the radio project and why that has been such an important part of this group.
So what we discovered was that as soon as we lose power, we lose our internet. So either, the options that we have up there are primarily Spectrum and CenturyLink. So as soon as the power goes out, for the most part, we lose the ability to get on the internet. A lot of people out there, my house, I have to have a network extender for my phone. So as soon as the internet goes out, I lose my phone altogether. And we have a number of elderly people that live out in the valley, fairly remote locations. And so we created 5 radio zones. And so they start from the Lynn County line to go all the way down to the McKenzie. So of those 5 zones, what we did was and we're using General Mobile radios. We researched it, and those seem to be our best resource out there. We've got 2 or 3 radio experts that are working with us. And so what we did was we created those 5 radio zones, and each radio zone has a frequency that they're assigned, which is one of the standard program General Mobile frequencies. And then so we've got 5 radio zones for each zone. So in the event something happens, you can go to that zone channel and talk to your neighbors and just check and make sure that they're okay, this kind of thing. And then what we did was we identified 2 emergency radio channels. And so those go directly to the fire department, where we have a base station set up there. And we don't have any repeaters out there. And so without the repeater, our whole goal is to do kind of a human repeater chain. So in sense, zone 5 could talk to 4, the fire station is in zone 3, and then on and on and on. So we could bounce back up, and a lot of those zones kind of overlap. So you can talk in zone 4 or 5 if you want. Hopefully, in the event of a big emergency, everybody will have the ability to get on that General Mobile radio. And we've got training classes that we do at the fire department. Our radio guys come in and talk about antennas and how to run the radios. And it's complicated for some, but General Mobile is pretty easy to operate. But being able to reach out and talk to your neighbor during the ice storm, I was talking to 4 or 5 of my neighbors on a regular basis. And I think that it just makes people feel a little bit better when they know they can see what's going on down the road, or if they can reach the fire station and know that people are out there listening if they need help.
That's tremendous peace of mind. And for our listeners, I want to confirm and clarify with you that GMRS, FRS is different than ham radio. Little less complicated, some of the same benefits. Yes?
Yeah, so the GMRS radio does require an FCC license. I believe it's $35, and it's good for 10 years now, and it's good for the entire family. So anybody in your family can they'll issue a radio identification number. And so anybody can use it, and all the General Mobile radios that you buy are already pre-programmed with the channels that have been assigned to General Mobile radios. So when you get them, you don't have to program them. You can add additional things in there like national weather and scan other stuff, but for the most part, they're already programmed. So they're easy to operate. The licensing is, it's not a test. It's more of give us your information. So tell us who you are. Give us our $35 and go ahead and talk on it. And we try to, make sure that people understand that, even though it's a lot of people have access to it, that, it's important that, you keep some decorum and it's not a toy to be played with when there's an emergency going on.
What is the secret to keeping your community engaged?
Well, you guys both probably know that that's a tough one. And people get really excited when there's an emergency. So if there's a snowstorm or if there's an ice storm or a wildfire, the participation that you get, is huge. But it's like a ripple. So at the top of the ripple, people are very excited, concerned, they want to know everything. But as soon as the weather gets nice and nothing's going on, they forget all about it until the next problem arises. And so I think we've all seen, I don't recall as a kid ever seeing the type of weather events that we've had in recent years. I mean, this ice storm last year was crazy, where the wildfire stuff has taken on a whole new life of its own. And so I think people are getting that, and I think they're being better prepared in a sense. And we just keep whittling away at that on our Facebook page. We try to put out as much information as we can. I will put out like major weather events if the National Weather Service comes out with a wind advisory or heavy snow. We'll get that out, and that gets a lot of attention. There's a lot of people that do pay attention to that. I put one out, I think, on this last week when we had this windstorm come in, and I want to say that it on Facebook reached well over 1,000 people. So that's a pretty good number for out there. And so I think to provide information, make people think about it. And then we'll put stuff on there. Lane County did a great job of putting out a preparedness stuff, how to process water. What do you do if you run out of water? What kind of foods do you store? Another big issue for rural people is livestock. What do we do with our livestock? And so I listened to the podcast last month and we talked about livestock. But, during the wildfire, when they did the evacuation of the Mohawk Valley, my house overlooks Marcola Road, and it was crazy. I mean, no one was moving on Marcola Road, and everybody had a goat or a sheep or a cow in the back of their truck trying to get them out of there. So trying to make people understand that, if something's coming around the bend like a big wildfire, don't wait until level 3 to make a decision on what you're going to do with your livestock. So, and people are pretty excited about that. So I think on average, when we have a meeting, we get, 30 to 40 people show up, and that, keeps things, I think, kind of going.
What kind of meeting format do you have? Do you have different topics every time? What does it look like?
It depends on what it is. We've been kind of focused on the radio lately because that's the big issue. A lot of the preparedness stuff we can put out on social media, like, how do you prepare water? What kind of food? But right now we've been really focused on the radio part of it because that's the most complicated part. And that's what that seems to be where the interest is at, to get a radio and understand how to work it. And so we just had a meeting on that. I think it was last month, and we had our radio people come in, our antenna specialist, and answer a lot of those radio questions. And then, of course, we did a debrief on the wildfire season. The chief provided that.
So if you had to sum it up, what are the top 3 benefits for the Mohawk Valley community in doing this work?
First, I would say that it brings in kind of a sense of community. I think it's one of those things that there's a lot of people that are interested in it, especially rural folks. I think, you live out there, you run a well, you cut your own firewood, you have gardens and livestock and stuff. So there's a sense of community there too. I think being able to reach out and ask a question, or advice on how to do something is another part of it. And then I think the third part is the whole goal of this is to have people understand that, in the event of a major disaster, you've got to have a plan for your family. You can't think that government's going to rush out there the day that, a big earthquake happens. You've got to have your own plan. You've got to be prepared. It's amazing how many people don't have firewood stored that live out there. Make sure that in the winter months you've got fuel for your generators and all that stuff. And then what we did was the 1st of November is we made Saturday kind of generator day. And so we said, everybody get out, get your generators out, start them, make sure you got fuel, and they run. So I think those are the big 3 things. And we just want people to think about it and understand that, you gotta think about your family first and make sure that you've got some resources available to you if something happens.
I wish we had 100 Kevins that we could send out to communities to lead this kind of work. And you do have a unique perspective in being not only a community member who cares very deeply, but also a first responder too. So you've really seen it through multiple angles. Since we can't clone you, what advice would you give to someone who's interested in doing something like this in their community?
From what I understand, a number of the rural fire departments are looking at this. I know McKinsey is. We have kind of overlapping response on Camp Creek and McKinsey View. So, we know that both Coburg and McKinsey View or McKinsey Fire Department are evaluating this as well. And I mean, it's not rocket science. It's, trying to reach out to the members of your community. There's a ton of information available out there, through FEMA, through the state, through the county. And I think it's just getting people to think about that. And I hate to say this, but sometimes the best time to jump on that's after a major ice storm or a fire, why it's still fresh in people's minds that, I just spent a week without, power at my home and my kids are bouncing off the wall because they don't have internet or, those social media outlets. And there's just so many things that you can get that will make life at your home much easier, cell phone chargers, that are battery backed up and, food and water and all those things that can really impact your life, for a week or so when you don't have anything going on there. So, I think that anybody else, it's just a matter of, and I think the rural fire departments are a great place to start because in a lot of places, they're really kind of the, government agency in that area, between them and the school district. And, that's where people go. I mean, the Mohawk Rural Valley Fire Department, is a big part of that community. And I think that it builds really good well between the fire department and the citizens in the valley as well. So
I appreciate that point too. I've come to understand a little bit more about the role that those rural fire departments play in communities, and it's very special. And I'm glad that especially in the Mohawk Valley, it has sort of helped get this group created and provided that community connection that I think will keep people engaged.
Thank you so much for being with us today,
Yeah.
Kevin. This has been interesting and inspiring.
Well, thank you for having me.
We do still want to hear questions that people have so that we can answer those as part of a Q&A next month to wrap up the first season of the show. So there are directions on how to submit those questions in the show notes, and we hope to hear from you if there's something you feel like we didn't cover in enough detail or we covered it in too much detail and now we've confused you. Let us know what you are most curious about when it comes to emergency preparedness.
When It Hits the Fan is brought to you by Lane County Emergency Management and co-hosted by Lane County Emergency Manager Tiffany Brown and Public Information Officer Devon Ashbridge. Music is by the Love Gems. Many thanks to our listeners and guests. We are so glad you're here to help us create a more prepared community. You can find more information, including episodes and show notes, at lanecountyor.gov/fan. Sign up to receive emergency alerts at lanealerts.org. The views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of Lane County government.